The unexpected invasion. It was an ordinary day on Earth. People were going about their usual routines, commuting to work, sending kids off to school, and enjoying the calm of their everyday lives. But little did they know, this peaceful moment would soon be shattered forever. High above Earth's atmosphere, something extraordinary was happening. At first, no one noticed anything out of the ordinary. The skies were clear, the sun was shining, and everything seemed normal. But as the hours passed, something unusual began to happen. A group of dark, metallic shapes appeared in the sky, hovering far above the clouds. These ships, large and sleek, moved with an eerie precision. No one could explain what they were, and soon, rumors spread across the globe. Some people thought it was a military exercise, others thought it might be a meteor shower, but no one truly knew what was coming. Then the ships began to descend. They didn't fall like meteors. Instead, they glided down slowly, almost as if they were being guided by an invisible force. The people below watched in awe and terror, their hearts racing. News stations quickly picked up on the phenomenon, and soon, the entire world was watching in shock as these enormous ships landed in major cities around the globe. In New York, London, Paris, Tokyo, and many other cities, the streets were filled with confused and terrified crowds. They stared at the massive dark ships as they landed with a soft, almost imperceptible thud. Some thought it was some kind of prank. Others feared the worst. But no one had any idea what these ships were or what they wanted. When the ships finally touched the ground, the hatch doors slowly opened, and out stepped the aliens. They were tall, easily over 7 feet in height, with smooth, gleaming armor that covered their bodies from head to toe. Their faces were hidden behind dark, glass-like helmets, but their movements were fluid and controlled, as if they had been trained for battle. They didn't look like anything from Earth. These were beings from another world, and they had arrived with one purpose: to conquer. The aliens spoke in a language no one understood, their voices deep and mechanical. They stood in formation, not showing any sign of fear or hesitation, as if they knew their mission would be completed without resistance. Their presence sent waves of panic through the crowds below. People began to scatter, running in every direction, unsure of what to do or where to go. The aliens made no attempt to communicate peacefully. Instead, they quickly started moving toward the centers of power, governments, military bases, and the capitals of countries. They took control of communication systems and broadcasted a message in multiple languages. The message was clear: Earth was now under their control. The aliens didn't ask for permission or negotiate. They declared that humanity had no place in the galaxy and that Earth would serve as their new colony. The announcement struck fear into the hearts of every person who heard it. Governments around the world scrambled to respond, but the aliens' technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Their weapons were powerful and terrifying, capable of disabling entire cities in a matter of seconds. Any resistance seemed pointless against their advanced technology. In the first few hours of the invasion, millions of people were captured and taken by the aliens. The world's leaders had no choice but to comply. Earth's military forces, though brave, stood no chance against the alien invaders. The aliens had weapons that could disable entire fleets in the blink of an eye. The human military had nothing that could fight back. Some countries tried to negotiate, but the aliens showed no interest in peace. They were there to take what they wanted: Earth's natural resources, its people, and its position in the galaxy were all now theirs to command. Any attempts to rebel were quickly crushed, and entire cities were reduced to rubble as a warning to the rest of the world. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, there was a spark of defiance. A few small pockets of resistance began to form. Ordinary people, not soldiers, took to the streets and began fighting back in any way they could. They sabotaged alien equipment, set up secret hideouts, and tried to send messages to other parts of the world. But it wasn't enough. The aliens were far too powerful, and the resistance, though brave, was scattered and uncoordinated. But as the world fell under the aliens' control, something unexpected happened. One of the captured resistance leaders managed to escape from an alien facility. He brought with him a message that would change everything. There was a weapon, a powerful force, hidden somewhere on Earth, a force that had been dormant for centuries. This weapon could be humanity's only chance of survival. This was the beginning of a long and dangerous fight for survival. The aliens thought they had won, but they didn't know that humanity was capable of far more than they had ever imagined. As the aliens tightened their grip on Earth, a storm was brewing, one that would shake the invaders to their core. The question was, would humanity be able to rise up in time to stop the aliens before it was too late? The world was on edge. For weeks, the alien occupation of Earth had been spreading like wildfire. Cities had fallen, entire countries were under alien control, and humanity was struggling to find any semblance of resistance. The skies were no longer blue. Alien ships dominated the atmosphere, casting long shadows over every corner of the Earth. Humans lived in constant fear. Anyone who tried to resist was quickly punished, and the streets were filled with the eerie silence of despair. But amidst all this, something was stirring. A small, secret group of resistance fighters had managed to stay hidden from the aliens. They operated in the shadows, quietly planning their next move. They were made up of civilians, former soldiers, engineers, and scientists. Ordinary people who had once been normal citizens, now united by a singular purpose: to take back Earth. Their leader, a former military officer named Sarah Thompson, had once been a strategist for one of the world's most powerful armies. But when the aliens arrived, the military was powerless to stop them. Now, Sarah led the group with a quiet but unwavering determination. She had been in the heart of the battle, watching as her comrades fell, one by one, under the might of the alien forces. But Sarah refused to believe that humanity was finished. She knew there had to be more to Earth than the aliens realized, and she was determined to find it. It all began with a message that had come from the escaped resistance leader: the weapon. The one weapon that had been hidden away for centuries, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. The moment was now. Sarah and her team gathered in a small, abandoned building beneath the ruins of what had once been a bustling city. They huddled around a map of the world, tracing their fingers across the crumbled continents, looking for clues that would lead them to this secret weapon. The map was old, full of faded markings, but one location stood out: a forgotten military installation in the middle of a remote frozen wasteland, far from the aliens' watchful eyes. It was a long shot, but Sarah was determined. The aliens had taken control of Earth's major cities, but they had overlooked one key detail: there were places they didn't understand. Remote locations, long-hidden military bunkers, and ancient structures that had survived for centuries. These were the places where secrets were kept, and Sarah believed that the key to defeating the aliens was buried in one of these forgotten spots. The team quickly gathered supplies, weapons, and technology that they could use to get through the alien patrols undetected. It was a risky move. If they were caught, it would be the end for all of them. But it was a chance they had to take. The weapon they sought could be humanity's only hope. As they prepared for their journey, Sarah's mind raced with questions. What was this weapon? How could something so powerful be hidden for so long? And most importantly, why had the aliens overlooked it? They were technologically advanced, ruthless in their occupation, and yet they had missed something this important. The journey was long and dangerous. The resistance fighters moved quickly, using underground tunnels and back roads to avoid alien checkpoints. They traveled under the cover of night, never staying in one place too long. The world around them was eerily silent, as if Earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The alien ships loomed overhead, their cold, metallic forms watching every move humanity made. The team had to be careful. One wrong move, and it would be all over. Days passed, and the group made their way through rugged terrain and harsh conditions. The frozen wastelands were unforgiving, but they pressed on, determined to reach their destination. They were close now, so close they could almost taste it. As they neared the old military installation, Sarah could feel the tension rising within the group. Everyone knew what was at stake. They had no idea what kind of weapon awaited them, but they knew one thing for certain. If they didn't find it, humanity's last hope would be lost forever. The final stretch of their journey was the most difficult. Alien patrols were everywhere, and the team had to move silently, taking out any threats before they were detected. Every step brought them closer to their goal, but the risk of being caught was higher than ever. Finally, after days of travel, they arrived at the entrance to the military bunker. It was hidden deep beneath the ice and snow, covered in layers of camouflage that had kept it safe for centuries. The entrance was sealed tight, but the team was ready. They had found an old access code, one that had been buried in the archives of a forgotten military database. It was their only chance. With a trembling hand, Sarah input the code. The massive metal door groaned and slowly opened, revealing a long corridor that led deeper into the earth. The team entered cautiously, weapons drawn, ready for whatever they might find. They were about to discover the truth. But as they moved deeper into the bunker, something strange began to happen. The air seemed to thicken and the lights flickered. The deeper they went, the more they felt like they were being watched. It was as if the building itself was alive, holding its breath, waiting for them to uncover its secrets. They reached the central chamber of the bunker, and there, in the middle of the room, was a large cylindrical device. It was covered in strange markings, and at first glance, it looked like nothing more than an ancient piece of technology. But as Sarah approached it, she felt a surge of energy, a sense of power emanating from the device. This was it, the weapon. But what exactly was it? As Sarah and her team prepared to study the device, they suddenly realized they were not alone. The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. Alien soldiers. They had followed them here. The chase was on. The weapon had been found, but the fight for survival had just begun. The air in the underground chamber was thick with tension as Sarah and her team stood around the strange ancient device. Its cold, metallic surface reflected the faint light from their torches, casting eerie shadows along the walls. They had found it, the weapon that could potentially save Earth. But its purpose was still a mystery. What did it do? How was it activated? And most importantly, why had the aliens not found it in all their time on Earth? Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. The alien soldiers were closing in. Every second counted. She motioned for her team to spread out, each member scanning the area for signs of an ambush. The sound of footsteps, distant but growing louder, echoed through the tunnels. They were running out of time. "We need to figure this out fast," Sarah whispered, her voice steady but full of determination. "This weapon is our only chance." Her second-in-command, Marcus, a tall, broad-shouldered former engineer, approached the device cautiously. He ran his fingers over the strange markings on the surface, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It doesn't look like anything I've ever seen," he muttered. "These symbols, they're not from any language I recognize." Sarah joined him at the device, her mind racing. Could this be some kind of alien technology? Or was it something even older, something left behind by Earth's ancestors, long before the aliens arrived? "I'm going to try something," Marcus said, pulling a small device from his belt. It looked like a portable scanner, and he quickly attached it to the side of the weapon. A soft hum filled the room, and the scanner beeped in response. The lights in the chamber flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. The ground beneath their feet trembled slightly, as if the bunker itself was waking up after centuries of slumber. Sarah's heart raced. Was the weapon responding to Marcus' scan? Or was it something else? The tension in the air was palpable. Every second felt like an eternity. Just as Marcus began to analyze the scanner's results, a voice echoed down the corridor behind them. "They found us." The voice belonged to Ella, one of the resistance fighters who had stayed behind to guard the entrance. Sarah's eyes widened. They were too late. The aliens were almost here. "Get the scanner back," Sarah shouted, her voice urgent. "We need to move, now." Marcus hesitated for a split second before yanking the scanner from the device and turning to face Sarah. But just as he did, the ground trembled again, this time with a violent force. The walls shook, and dust rained down from the ceiling. The weapon suddenly came to life, its strange markings glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. Then, in an instant, the room was filled with an electric hum. A bright flash of light erupted from the device, blinding everyone in the room. Sarah staggered back, shielding her eyes. She could hear the sound of distant, high-pitched alarms ringing, echoing through the bunker. "What's happening?" Marcus shouted, his voice tinged with panic. The others looked around in confusion as the light from the device grew brighter, stronger. The walls seemed to bend and warp under the pressure. It was as if the very fabric of reality was being pulled apart. Suddenly, the light stopped. The room fell silent. Sarah blinked, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The device had stopped glowing, but something had changed. She could feel it in the air. There was a strange, almost suffocating energy around them. It wasn't the same as before. It was something more dangerous, more alive. "Everyone, move," Sarah ordered, her voice sharp as she snapped out of her stunned state. "We've triggered something. The aliens are on their way. We need to get out of here, now." The team scrambled, making their way back toward the exit. But as they moved, they heard the unmistakable sound of boots pounding down the hallway. Alien soldiers. They were close, too close. The resistance fighters raced through the dark corridors, trying to stay ahead of their pursuers. The weapon had been activated, but at what cost? What had they unleashed? They reached the main entrance, but the door was now sealed shut, locked by some unknown force. Panic began to rise in the group as they realized they were trapped. "We can't stay here," Sarah said, looking around desperately. "We need to find another way out." Suddenly, a deep rumbling sound echoed through the tunnel, and the walls shook once again. The ground beneath their feet trembled as a powerful surge of energy shot out from the weapon. The resistance fighters staggered, struggling to stay on their feet. Then, without warning, the walls of the bunker cracked open, revealing a massive underground chamber. The walls were lined with strange, glowing symbols, and in the center of the room stood another device, larger, more powerful, and far more intimidating than the one they had just activated. It was connected to the first device by a series of glowing energy conduits, and Sarah could feel the energy emanating from it, a force so powerful it nearly made her knees buckle. The aliens had been searching for this weapon for centuries, and now they had unknowingly triggered something far worse than they had ever anticipated. The resistance fighters looked at each other, unsure of what to do. They were caught between the oncoming alien soldiers and a weapon that could either save or destroy them all. The choice was clear. They had to take control of the device before the aliens did. But as Sarah moved toward the device, she realized something terrifying. The power they had just unleashed was beyond their understanding. Could they even control it, or had they just sealed their fate? As the alien soldiers closed in, the group prepared for a final stand. The battle for Earth had taken a new, terrifying turn. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to control a power that could either save them or destroy them all. The underground chamber was eerily silent, the air thick with the tension of an impending battle. The alien soldiers were closing in, their footsteps echoing down the long corridors, while Sarah and her team stood frozen in place. The glowing energy conduits connected the two mysterious devices, casting a faint, otherworldly light across the room. The power they had unleashed seemed to pulse with life, its energy radiating outward, making the walls tremble as though it were alive. "Do you feel that?" Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. He was standing near the second, larger device, his hand hovering over the controls as if he were afraid to touch it. The atmosphere in the room was charged with a strange, magnetic pull that seemed to make the very air heavier with every passing second. "I feel it," Sarah replied, her voice tense. "This power is unlike anything we've ever seen before. It's ancient, but it feels familiar, like it's been waiting for something or someone." The team exchanged nervous glances, but none of them dared to speak their fears aloud. They had no idea what the devices were capable of, but there was no time to figure it out now. The aliens were almost upon them, and the only thing that mattered was survival. The ground beneath them rumbled once more, shaking violently as if the entire planet was reacting to the energy that had been released. The walls groaned in protest, the cracks widening as the power from the weapon surged. A deafening hum filled the room, and Sarah could feel the vibrations deep in her bones. "Now's our chance," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. He took a deep breath, then placed his hand on the console of the larger device. The moment his fingers made contact, the room seemed to come alive. The lights flickered and brightened, and the entire structure seemed to hum with a newfound intensity. The energy pulsed, sending waves of heat radiating through the chamber. But before they could react, a sharp, guttural voice echoed from the doorway. "Stop. You're too late." The resistance fighters spun around to see a tall, imposing alien figure step into the room, flanked by a small army of soldiers. Its body was covered in armor, sleek and dark, with glowing symbols etched into its surface. The leader's eyes gleamed with cold, calculating malice as it surveyed the team, its gaze lingering on the devices. "You've activated something you cannot control," the alien leader growled, its voice dripping with disdain. "That weapon is beyond your understanding. It was never meant for creatures like you." Sarah's heart raced. She knew they were facing their most dangerous enemy yet. The alien leader was powerful, and its soldiers were more than a match for any resistance fighter. But they had no choice. The weapon was their only hope. "Maybe you're right," Sarah said, her voice hard as steel. "But we're not backing down. Not now." The alien leader's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "Very well, then prepare to die." With a sharp command, the alien soldiers advanced, their weapons raised and ready to fire. Sarah didn't hesitate. She motioned to her team, and they immediately spread out, taking cover behind the nearest structures. The tension in the room skyrocketed as both sides prepared for battle. But as the first shots rang out, something unexpected happened. The larger device suddenly came to life, its power surging with an intensity none of them had anticipated. A brilliant, blinding light exploded from its core, engulfing the entire chamber. The alien soldiers screamed in shock and pain as the energy beams blasted through the air, sending them flying backward with explosive force. The device was not just a weapon, it was a force of nature. Sarah's eyes widened as she watched the destruction unfold. The alien soldiers, once so confident and powerful, were now powerless against the energy the device was releasing. It was as if the weapon had awakened a primal force within the very planet itself, and now it was turning against the invaders. But as the chaos unfolded, a terrible realization struck Sarah. The weapon wasn't just targeting the aliens, it was targeting everything in its path, friend or foe. "Get down," Sarah shouted, pulling her team to the ground as the blasts continued to rip through the room. The alien leader was knocked to the floor, but it quickly rose to its feet, its face twisted in rage. It understood the power of the weapon now. It wasn't just a weapon of destruction, it was a weapon of absolute control. For the first time, the aliens seemed uncertain. They had expected to enslave humanity, to conquer Earth with ease. But now, they were up against a force far greater than they had ever imagined. As Sarah struggled to stay conscious amid the chaos, she saw a flicker of light in the distance. The device was charging up again, preparing for another devastating blast. "We need to shut it down," Marcus shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the weapon. "If we don't, it'll tear us all apart." Sarah shook her head. "We can't. It's too powerful. It's beyond us now." In that moment, everything seemed to slow down. The alien soldiers were retreating, disoriented by the weapon's power. But the alien leader wasn't giving up. It locked eyes with Sarah, its face a mask of fury. "You may have awakened the weapon," it snarled, "but you will not control it. You will never be able to control it." But Sarah didn't listen. She turned her focus back to the device, realizing that this was their only chance. The aliens might have underestimated them, but they had no idea what they had truly unleashed. With a determined look in her eyes, Sarah made a decision. She wasn't going to wait for the aliens to take control of the situation. It was time for humanity to rise, whether the world was ready for it or not. The battle was far from over, but now, humanity had a weapon that could turn the tide. The question was, could they survive long enough to use it? The battlefield was chaos. The once quiet underground facility had become a war zone, with the blinding flashes of energy weapons lighting up the dark corridors. The alien soldiers had regrouped and were advancing once again, this time with more caution, their once arrogant confidence replaced by fear. The device they had tried to use to enslave humanity was now a wild, untamable force, and they realized they were no longer in control. Sarah and her team crouched behind the wreckage of a fallen wall, the debris providing some semblance of protection. The hum of the powerful weapon filled the air, and the tremors from each blast shook the very foundation of the facility. She could hear the alien leader's voice echoing from somewhere deeper in the building, barking orders to his troops. "Hold your ground," Sarah whispered to her team, her voice steady despite the panic that threatened to rise in her chest. "We can't let them retake control of the device." Marcus nodded grimly, his eyes scanning the area. "But how? It's too strong. We can't just charge in and hope for the best." "We don't have a choice," Sarah replied, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We need to act fast before the weapon destroys everything." But as Sarah turned to look at the device, her heart sank. The energy beams it was releasing had become erratic, splintering through the facility in unpredictable directions. The walls were cracking, the floor buckling under the strain of the immense power being unleashed. Time was running out. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was the alien leader, its armor scorched from the blasts, but still intact. Its eyes locked onto Sarah, a mixture of rage and recognition in its gaze. "You think you can control this power?" it sneered. "You are nothing. You have no idea what you've awakened." Sarah's heart raced, but she refused to back down. "We didn't awaken it." "You did," she said. "You came here to conquer us, to enslave humanity, and you failed." The alien leader stepped closer, its soldiers fanning out behind it, forming a ring of protection. "You are a fool," it hissed. "The weapon is not just a tool. It is a living entity, and you are playing with forces beyond your comprehension." "Maybe," Sarah replied, "but we're not going to sit back and let you win." With a single gesture, the alien leader ordered its soldiers to advance. The battlefield erupted into chaos once again, energy blasts cutting through the air as both sides fought fiercely. Sarah ducked behind a pillar, narrowly avoiding a blast that would have killed her. She quickly pulled out her sidearm and fired, taking down 2 alien soldiers in quick succession. But it wasn't enough. The aliens kept coming, their numbers overwhelming. The team was outnumbered, and the weapon's unpredictable blasts were growing stronger by the second. Sarah's thoughts raced as she tried to figure out a plan. If they didn't find a way to shut down the device, the facility, and everyone in it, would be destroyed. Then, out of the corner of her eye, Sarah spotted something. A control panel on the far side of the room, hidden behind a pile of wreckage. It looked like the power source for the device, the one thing that might be able to stop the energy surge. "Marcus," she shouted, pointing toward the control panel. "Over there. If we can reach it, we can shut this thing down." Marcus glanced at the panel, then at the alien soldiers closing in on them. He nodded, determination lighting up his face. "Let's go." The 2 of them made a run for it, weaving through the wreckage and dodging blasts as they moved. The aliens fired relentlessly, but Sarah and Marcus were too fast. They reached the control panel just as another blast shook the ground beneath them, sending chunks of concrete flying. "Cover me," Sarah yelled, diving behind a broken wall for protection as Marcus rushed to the control panel. He quickly assessed the situation. The panel was covered in strange alien symbols, but it didn't seem too complicated if he could just get the right wires. Come on," Marcus muttered under his breath as he ripped open the panel. His hands moved quickly, bypassing security locks and pulling wires from the panel. It was working. He could feel it. The energy levels on the device were fluctuating. If he could just give it one final push. A loud bang from behind him made Marcus freeze. The alien leader had arrived, its soldiers surrounding him. The air crackled with tension. It was now or never. "Do you really think you can stop it?" The alien leader sneered, its weapon aimed at Marcus. "You have no idea what you're doing." But Sarah wasn't about to let him die. She moved quickly, stepping into the line of fire and taking the shot at the nearest soldier. The alien leader turned its attention toward her, giving Marcus the precious moments he needed. He slammed the last wire into place. The entire facility shook as a violent surge of power erupted from the device. For a moment, everything stopped, the world holding its breath. Then, with a deafening roar, the weapon's energy began to destabilize. The lights flickered and then went out entirely, leaving the room bathed in darkness. A second later, a bright explosion lit up the room as the weapon's energy imploded. The blast sent everyone flying backward, and the facility itself began to crumble. Dust and debris filled the air as Sarah scrambled to her feet, her vision blurry. "Did we do it?" Marcus asked, his voice weak from the blast. Sarah nodded, though she could barely hear him over the ringing in her ears. "I think we did." But even as the dust began to settle, they knew that this battle wasn't over. The weapon had been shut down, but the war was far from finished. The aliens had underestimated humanity before. Now, they had unleashed something far more powerful than they could ever have imagined. The last stand had been won, but at what cost? The air was thick with dust, and the crumbling facility groaned as if it were on the verge of collapse. The tremors had finally stopped, but the damage was extensive. Sarah wiped the blood from her face, trying to focus as the dust cloud slowly began to settle. Her eyes scanned the room, every movement filled with caution. Her team, though bruised and battered, was still alive. Marcus stumbled over to her, still catching his breath. His clothes were torn and his hands were covered in alien blood, but his eyes were determined. "We did it. The device is gone." Sarah nodded, her gaze turning to the wreckage of the weapon that had nearly destroyed them all. It was hard to believe they'd managed to shut it down. They'd come so close to losing everything. The alien mercenaries had underestimated them, but this wasn't over yet. The destruction of the weapon had bought them time, but it hadn't ended the threat. The aliens still wanted Earth, and they would stop at nothing to conquer it. "Is everyone all right?" Sarah asked, her voice hoarse but steady. "Mostly," replied Lieutenant Harris, checking on the others. He was limping, his leg still injured from earlier in the battle, but he was alive. "A few bruises, but we're all here." "What's next?" Sarah's eyes darkened. She glanced over at the remains of the control room. The alien leader's body had been thrown against the wall by the explosion. It was lifeless now, its menacing presence finally silenced. But their mission wasn't finished. The destruction of the device had been a victory, but it was a hollow one without the larger war being won. "We need to warn the rest of the world," Sarah said, her mind racing. "The aliens will retaliate. They won't stop after this. They've already underestimated us once." Marcus frowned, still trying to grasp the full scope of what had happened. "They'll be back. We've only delayed them." "Exactly," Sarah replied. "But we've learned something important today. We're not helpless. We're not just prey for them to hunt. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of those words. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. Humanity had fought back, and won, even if just for now. Sarah couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. But it was dimmed by the reality of their situation. The war was far from over. They moved carefully through the wreckage, making their way toward the outer exit of the facility. The once bustling underground command center was now a graveyard of broken technology and shattered dreams. The alien invaders had hoped to conquer Earth and enslave its people, but their plans had been interrupted. For now. "Do you think we'll make it?" Lieutenant Harris asked, his voice full of uncertainty as they reached the surface. Sarah paused, taking a deep breath of the cool night air. The stars above seemed distant, as if mocking them. The darkness of the sky stretched endlessly, a reminder of the long road ahead. "We will, but it won't be easy." The silence that followed was full of unspoken understanding. Each one of them knew that this was only the beginning. Humanity had just shown the universe that it wouldn't roll over and die. But they had also made themselves a target, and the aliens would come back. The peace they'd just gained would be fragile, a fleeting thing. They reached the extraction point, where the last of the human forces were waiting. Their faces were grim, knowing the battle was far from over, but there was a quiet strength in their eyes. They had fought and survived, and they were ready to fight again. As the transport lifted off from the devastated facility, Sarah took one last look at the crumbling structure below. The building that had once held the power to enslave humanity now lay in ruins. It had taken everything they had to destroy the weapon. It had cost them lives, and there would likely be more losses to come. But there was one thing that was clear. The aliens had underestimated them, and that would be their greatest mistake. The crew of the ship remained silent, each of them lost in their thoughts. But Sarah knew one thing. The world had changed. Humanity had proven that they could stand up to the alien threat, and they would do it again if they had to. "We'll make them pay for what they've done," Sarah muttered, almost to herself. Marcus gave her a tired but resolute nod. "And we'll make sure they never get the chance to do it again." The ship began its journey home, leaving behind the remnants of the battle and the hope of a new beginning. The future was uncertain, but one thing was certain. Humanity had discovered its strength, and the universe was about to learn a powerful lesson. The aliens had thought they could enslave Earth. They had thought that humanity was weak and vulnerable. But now, they would know the truth. Earth was not a place to be taken lightly. And as long as there was breath in the humans fighting for it, the fight for survival would never be over. The journey home was long, filled with silence, but it was not an uncomfortable one. The crew knew that they had survived against all odds, but they also knew that this was just a brief respite. The real battle was still ahead, and their war had only just begun. As the transport ship cut through the cold expanse of space, Sarah stared out the viewport. The stars twinkled, distant and cold, offering no comfort. Yet she found herself reflecting on everything they had accomplished so far. The alien mercenaries had underestimated humanity, and that mistake had cost them dearly. But Sarah knew better than to celebrate just yet. The aliens wouldn't rest until they had their revenge. The mission had been a success in many ways. They had destroyed the weapon that could have enslaved the planet, but that was not enough. The aliens would come back, stronger and more determined than ever. Humanity needed to be ready. They had to be united, not just to survive, but to take the fight back to the invaders. "Commander," Marcus said, breaking her thoughts, "we have a message from the higher-ups. They want a report." Sarah nodded, still gazing at the vast emptiness outside the ship. "Put it through." A few moments later, the holographic display lit up in front of her, showing the faces of several high-ranking officers, their expressions grave. "Commander Harris," one of them spoke, his voice steady but filled with tension. "We've received word of alien fleets gathering in nearby sectors. They are mobilizing for another strike on Earth." Sarah's heart sank, But she wasn't surprised. This was what she had expected. "We knew it was coming," she said, her voice firm. "What's the plan?" "We need all available forces on the ground and in space. We are calling for an immediate mobilization of all defense units. Earth has been put on high alert. Your team's success in eliminating the weapon has bought us valuable time, but that's all." Sarah clenched her fists. The battle ahead would be unlike anything they had faced. The stakes were higher now. It wasn't just Earth's survival at risk. It was humanity's very existence. "We'll be ready," she replied, her voice resolute. "We'll fight back, and we won't make the same mistake twice." The transmission ended, and the ship continued its course back toward Earth. Sarah could feel the weight of the responsibility settling on her shoulders, but she wasn't afraid. She had seen what humanity could do when pushed to the brink. They fought with everything they had, and they didn't back down. The crew gathered in the common area, where Sarah took a seat and looked around at them. They were all exhausted, their bodies battered from the battle. But their spirits were stronger than ever. They had survived, and that had made all the difference. "Now we fight smarter," she said, standing up to address them. "We know what we're up against. The aliens think they can just invade and take what they want. They think they can crush us underfoot. But we've shown them that we're not just a planet to conquer. We're humans, and we don't give up. We'll fight for Earth, for every human on it." A quiet murmur of agreement spread through the crew. Sarah felt a spark of pride. They had faced the unimaginable, and now they were ready to face whatever came next. They would not let Earth fall, no matter the cost. As the ship approached Earth, Sarah could see the blue and green planet come into view. It had never looked more beautiful, more precious, than it did in that moment. But there was no time for rest. The alien threat was still out there, and it was only a matter of time before they would strike again. The crew prepared for the next phase of their mission, knowing that the fight for their world was far from over. They had taken the first step, but now they had to prepare for the next. "We've shown them our strength," Sarah said, more to herself than anyone else. "But we need to show them what humanity is really capable of." The transport ship touched down on Earth's surface, the sound of the engines quieting as it came to a stop. Sarah and her crew filed out, ready to face whatever came next. The battle had just begun, but this time, humanity was prepared. The aliens had thought they could enslave Earth, but now they would learn what it meant to face a species that refused to be controlled. The war was far from over, but Sarah knew that Earth's fight had just begun. With humanity united, they would not only survive, they would stand victorious. And as she looked out over the horizon, she couldn't help but feel that the aliens' biggest mistake had been underestimating the one thing they had never seen coming: the unbreakable spirit of humanity.